The prank lasted 9 seconds. That's how long it took for 3 adults to realize they had made a very serious mistake about a very quiet man. 9 seconds. Standing outside a cafe window on a Saturday morning, smirking, nudging each other, already half composing the story they were going to tell on Monday. The janitor they'd dismissed for 3 years hadn't even noticed them watching. But this story doesn't start at the cafe. It starts in a break room on a Friday afternoon, with 3 people who thought they were being funny. Hargrove & Associates was the kind of downtown office building that smelled like expensive candles in the lobby and burned coffee on every other floor. The clock above the break room microwave read 4:02 p.m., always 2 minutes fast, always ignored. Rachel Simmons was leaning against the counter, arms crossed, wearing the expression of someone who has just had what she considers a brilliant idea. "Let's set Clyde up on a blind date," she said. "With a deaf woman." She let that land. Tyler laughed first, then Brandon. Rachel looked pleased. "Let's see how awkward he gets. He's just going to freeze, like a statue." To them, it was a harmless Friday prank. Clyde Washington was 38, the building's quietest janitor, always in the same gray uniform, always moving through the halls with the quiet efficiency of someone who had long since stopped expecting anyone to say good morning first. He didn't socialize, didn't linger, cleaned his floors, clocked his hours, went home. "Cold," Rachel called him. "Weird," said Tyler. Brandon mostly didn't think about him at all, which is its own particular kind of dismissal. What none of them had ever bothered to ask was why. Because if any one of them had stayed 5 extra minutes on a Thursday evening, had glanced down the far hallway instead of heading straight to the parking garage, they would have seen Clyde sitting on an overturned mop bucket near the utility closet, phone propped against a bottle of cleaning solution, watching an ASL tutorial on mute so the sound wouldn't disturb anyone, practicing the same 3 signs over and over with his big calloused hands until they finally came out right. Not because someone asked him to, because he had a daughter at home who deserved a father who could keep up with her. Nobody had ever stayed those 5 extra minutes. So nobody knew. The next morning, Clyde pushed open the door of the Yellow Cup, a small cafe 2 blocks from the building. Mismatched chairs, a chalkboard menu, a bell above the door that jingled like it was glad to see you. He was still carrying the stiffness of a night shift in his shoulders. His jacket smelled faintly of the cold. He spotted her right away. Avery Bennett sat by the window, both hands wrapped around a coffee cup as though it were the warmest thing in the room, which, given the draft off the glass, it probably was. Long dark hair, a soft green sweater with a smudge of paint on the left sleeve she either hadn't noticed or didn't mind. She looked up when he walked in, and instead of the awkward wave most strangers exchange, she raised one hand and signed her name in a clean, unhurried arc. Avery. Clyde didn't pause, didn't look startled, didn't reach for his phone. He lifted his hands, those same tired hands that had spent the night mopping the 3rd-floor hallway, and signed back fluently, his name. A greeting. "Good morning. It's really nice to meet you. Natural and easy. The way you say something you've said 1,000 times." Outside the window, Rachel grabbed Tyler's arm hard enough to make him spill coffee on his sleeve. Brandon's jaw dropped. The prank had collapsed before anyone even sat down. Clyde took the seat across from Avery. She watched him with an expression he couldn't quite place, something between surprise and relief. The way you feel when you've been bracing for a difficult journey and someone tells you the roads are clear. She signed, slowly at first. "You know, ASL. My daughter is deaf," he said. The cafe was filling up around them, the late morning crowd settling in, but that table by the window stayed in its own quiet. The server stopped by a few minutes later, a young man who spoke his question to the room in general, the way people sometimes do when they've already decided someone requires more effort than they're prepared for. Clyde noticed, caught the server's eye, tapped the menu, and signed the specials for Avery without ceremony. Then he looked at her. "You pick. Take your time." When she shivered slightly from the cold draft off the glass, Clyde reached across without a word and slid his warm cup of water toward her. She looked down at it, then up at him, Such a small thing. The kind of gesture that doesn't announce itself, doesn't wait to be thanked, doesn't even fully know it's being kind. It just moves, the way water moves toward whatever needs it most. Outside. Rachel, Tyler, and Brandon were still at the window, not laughing now, not filming, just watching a man they had never once actually looked at, and beginning, slowly, to understand that they had missed something. But what none of them could see, and what Avery herself didn't know yet, was where she had already encountered this man before. And when the truth came out, it would change everything she thought she understood about the last 2 months of her life. He was just a janitor who pushed a cart past her office window at 11 at night. She had no idea he'd been leaving something on her desk, small things, without a word, without a name. 2 hours passed the way good hours do, without either of them checking the time once. They talked the way people talk when they've both been quietly lonely for longer than they've admitted, even to themselves. Careful at first, then easier, then almost effortless. Like two people who'd been having the same conversation in their heads for years and were finally saying it out loud. In their case, with their hands. Avery asked the question people always asked. How do you know ASL so well? Clyde told her, simply, the way he did everything. His daughter Blair was 8 years old. 4 years ago, after a medical complication that Clyde still carried somewhere behind his sternum, she had lost most of her hearing. The doctors explained it in careful clinical language, and Clyde had understood every word and none of it at the same time. He was 34, sitting in a hospital chair, a daughter in a bed down the hall, a wife who had walked out 2 years before that, a night shift in 4 hours, an apartment with a broken dishwasher, and a little girl who was about to wake up to a world that sounded different. So he learned. Library books, free videos on his phone during lunch breaks, balanced against the break room counter, a community center across town that offered evening ASL classes at no charge, 3 nights a week, bus ride included. Blair on his lap for the first 6 months, both of them learning together, her hands quick and certain from the start, his big and clumsy and determined. They made it a game. They made it theirs. You learned it for her, Avery signed. So she'd never feel alone, he said. He mentioned, almost in passing, that he was saving for Blair's hearing device, a good one, the kind the specialist had described with the careful optimism doctors use when they know the number at the end of the sentence is going to be hard to hear. He put a little aside every paycheck, worked extra night shifts when they were available, packed his own lunch every day in a beat-up blue thermos with a warped lid that no longer sat quite flush. He'd had the thermos since Blair was born. He wasn't replacing it until he absolutely had to. It was going to take longer than he'd planned. That was all right. He was patient. Avery sat very still for a moment. You're an amazing father, she signed. He shook his head. Not out of false modesty, but the way a person does when they've simply never thought of what they're doing as anything other than what needed to be done. Then he told her something that changed the whole shape of the morning. He looked at the table for a moment, then back up. I've seen you before. I cleaned the 7th floor. At night. Avery went still. I've seen you working late, he continued. Sometimes very late. After everyone else has left. Your light's always on around 11. She waited. I left things for you sometimes. On the corner of your desk by the window. Small things. I make them for Blair. I always pack extra. She thought back. The paper bag she'd found on her desk 3 or 4 times over the past month. Homemade oatmeal cookies. A small handwritten note that said only, "Have a safe evening." She had eaten those cookies cross-legged on the studio floor at midnight, behind on a deadline. And she had thought clearly and specifically. Someone in this building is kind. It had been one of the warmer thoughts of a cold few months. It had been him, every time. The man in the gray uniform who pushed his cart past her window and never knocked. She looked at him. He looked back. No explanation. No apology for the presumption. Just the quiet fact of it. Offered and received. She told him something then. Not the whole of it, but the edge of it. She had moved to this city 4 months ago. She didn't know many people. Most of her neighbors didn't sign. And the people she encountered in daily life, the pharmacist on the corner, The dry cleaner who smiled with visible relief when she pointed to her ticket number instead of trying to speak, rarely made the effort to face her when they talked, or spoke too fast, or gave up halfway through and moved on. She held no bitterness about it. It was simply the texture of her days, the low-grade friction of moving through a world not built for the way she communicated. It accumulated, the way cold accumulates through an old window, not in any single moment, but steadily, until one evening you look down and realize you've been wearing 2 sweaters for an hour without noticing. Clyde listened the way he did everything, fully, without the slight distraction of composing his next sentence while she was still finishing hers. He just listened. And then the server came back with the wrong order, set it down in front of Avery, addressed the table at large, loud and breezy, looking everywhere except at her. Clyde set his cup down. He stood, not dramatically, just stood, and said, evenly and without apology, "Excuse me." She ordered the blueberry scones, not the muffin, and she'd appreciate it if you'd look at her when you speak. He sat back down, picked up his cup, took a sip. The server blinked, nodded, went to fix it. Warmth rose in Avery's face. Not embarrassment, something with more weight than that. It was the first time in a long while that someone had stood beside her without pity in their eyes, without needing her to be grateful afterward. No performance, no sidelong look that said, "See what I did for you?" Just a person who noticed something wrong and quietly corrected it, then returned to his coffee like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. "You didn't have to do that," she signed. He nodded once. "I know." Then after a beat, but it needed doing. Before they left, Clyde reached into his canvas bag and pulled out a small handmade book. Pages cut and hand-sewn. A blue construction paper cover with Blair's name in careful block letters. Inside, pencil-drawn illustrations of ASL hand signs, labeled and sized for a child. He'd made it over several late evenings at the kitchen table. TV on low. A cup of decaf going cold at his elbow. For design inspiration, he signed, "If it's useful." Avery held it carefully, the way you hold something that took someone's time. On their way out, she gestured to a broken electrical outlet near the door. A handwritten out-of-order sign taped crookedly beside it. Clyde glanced at it, pulled a small toolkit from his jacket pocket as naturally as another man might pull out a pen, and fixed it in 4 minutes. The cafe owner came out of the back, looked at the working outlet, then at Clyde, with an expression of quiet disbelief. Avery stood by the door, watching, and felt something tighten gently in her chest. She was not a person who cried easily, but there was something about watching a man fix a broken thing without being asked, without an audience, without expecting anything in return. That made her eyes sting just slightly. She blinked it away. "See you Sunday?" Clyde signed. She nodded. What happened Tuesday morning, 3 days later, would force Clyde to choose between staying quiet and doing what was right. And everyone in the building was about to find out which one he'd pick. He didn't know yet that what he chose to say on Tuesday morning would cost him, and that the cost would keep climbing, right up until the morning it didn't. He wasn't supposed to hear it. Clyde was pushing his cart down the hall outside the break room on a Tuesday morning, wheels making their familiar low squeak on the linoleum. The door cracked just enough to let voices spill out. He wasn't listening. He was doing his job, the same as every Tuesday. And the voices simply found him. Rachel's, carrying the way it always did when she was enjoying herself. Best part is he had no idea. I wish we'd actually filmed it. Laughter, Tyler's first. Then Brandon's. Easy, unguarded. The kind that comes when people are sure no one who matters is close enough to hear. "I feel a little bad for the woman," Tyler said, with a pause that suggested he halfway meant it. "But honestly, it was just a joke. Nobody got hurt." "He's so uptight," Rachel said. "It's not like we committed a crime." Clyde stood very still in the hallway. He breathed in, slowly, out. The card handle was cool under his hands. The printer down the hall was running. The elevator dinged. Tuesday sounds, ordinary and unhurried. And underneath all of them, Something in Clyde had gone very quiet. The particular quiet that comes just before a person decides to do something they know will cost them. He pushed the door open. Not forcefully, he just opened it and walked in. The same way he walked into every room he cleaned, with the calm certainty of someone who has a right to be there, even on the days when nobody treats him like he does. Rachel looked up first. Her smile faded at the edges, the way a Polaroid develops in reverse. "Clyde, I won't take long," he said. His voice was low and even, not angry, still, the way a lake is still. You can't see the depth from the surface, but you know it's there. "I don't care that you were targeting me. I understand I'm not anyone's favorite here. That's fine." He looked at each of them in turn. Tyler studied the floor. Brandon found the wall very interesting. But Avery didn't do anything to you. She came to a cafe for a date, the same as any person would. You made her disability the punchline of a joke she didn't know she was in. She is not a prop, and she deserved better than that from the people who share a building with her every single day. He picked up his cart handle. "That's all," he said, and walked back out. In the hallway, his heart was hammering. He kept his face neutral, his pace steady, past the copier room, past the conference room with the glass walls where two people looked up from a meeting and then quickly back down, past the row of cubicles where keyboards went briefly silent as he passed. A few people had heard. He could feel it in the air, that particular stillness of a floor where something has just shifted and everyone is privately deciding what to do with it. He didn't know yet whether he'd done the right thing or the expensive thing. In his experience, those two had a way of being the same. That night, Blair was at the kitchen table when he got home, bent close over one of her drawings. A house with a yellow front door, a dog in the yard, 3 figures standing on the porch. She looked up the moment he came in and her whole face changed, like a lamp switching on. "How was your day, Dad?" He sat beside her and told her everything. The overheard conversation, the break room, what he'd said. He told it plainly, without softening the edges, because Blair had always understood more than people expected. She deserved the full truth in the same measure adults did. Blair listened carefully. Then she signed, with complete conviction, "You're a hero, Dad." Clyde looked at the drawing, the yellow door, the 3 figures on the porch, felt something press quietly at his ribs. "I hope it doesn't cost us too much," he thought. But he didn't sign that part. The changes started the next morning. His name quietly disappeared from the night shift rotation. His cleaning assignment shifted to the basement levels. Out of sight, out of the flow of the building's daily life. One of the floor supervisors, a man named Gary who had always given Clyde a friendly nod, became suddenly absorbed in his clipboard whenever Clyde passed. Fewer shifts meant less money. Less money meant Blair's hearing device, the number he'd been calculating toward all year, moved further away. He sat at the kitchen table each evening with a pen and a notepad, running the numbers the way his mother had balanced the grocery budget, looking carefully for room that wasn't there, finding none, putting the notepad away, getting up and making dinner. He didn't tell Blair. Some weights you carry quietly, because the people you love are already carrying enough just by being in the world. Rachel, to her credit, managed to make things worse without much effort. On Thursday morning, Clyde arrived on the 2nd floor to find a wastepaper basket tipped over in the hallway, paper, coffee cups, and the remains of a bag of chips scattered across the linoleum. It might have been an accident, except it happened again Friday and Monday. Clyde cleaned it up each time, without visible frustration, without making a face, even in the empty hallway where no one could see. His mother had told him once that who you are when no one is watching is the only version of yourself that truly counts. He'd believed it then, in the specific way children believe things they hear from people they trust. He believed it still, in the quieter, harder way of someone who's been tested on it. He left Avery's paper bag on her desk that night regardless. Homemade ginger snaps. Blair had helped roll them, standing on her step stool at the kitchen counter, very serious about getting the shape right. On Wednesday evening, Clyde sat on the edge of his bed and typed out a message to Avery. He started over twice and deleted once before he settled on plain honesty, which, in his experience, was usually the right place to land anyway. There's something I should have told you from the start. The date last Saturday wasn't arranged the way it seemed. Some coworkers set it up as a prank. Because you're deaf. I'm truly sorry. He pressed send, set the phone face down on the nightstand. He lay back and looked at the ceiling for a long time. Sleep didn't come easily. What Avery signed back the next time they met would stop him completely. Because it turned out she had been sitting on a truth of her own this whole time. One that reframed everything Clyde thought he understood about the morning they first met. She had known something was off from the beginning, but she had stayed anyway. And the reason she stayed was the one thing he would never have predicted. She was already at the cafe when he arrived. Same table, same window. Both hands around her coffee cup again, as though holding something warm was simply what she did when she was working through something difficult. Clyde sat down. He had prepared a more specific apology on the walk over. He got through none of it, because the moment he settled into the chair, Avery signed. I suspected from the beginning. He stared at her. Not everything, she continued, but enough. The reservation details were slightly off. The timing felt arranged. I've had enough people underestimate me over the years to recognize the shape of it. A pause. I've learned to read a room without sound. That includes reading people. Then why did you stay? He signed. She looked at him steadily. Because you didn't hesitate. Not for 1 second. And you can't fake the absence of hesitation. That's the one thing people always give away when they're performing kindness instead of practicing it. You had none. So I decided to stay long enough to find out who you were. Clyde was quiet for a moment. I'm glad you stayed, he signed finally. So am I, she said. They sat in the comfortable silence of people who have arrived somewhere real and are content to let it settle before naming it. Then Avery told him something she hadn't told anyone at Hargrove and Associates. Her grandfather's name was Edmund Bennett, 73 years old, widowed, deliberate in the way that men with genuine authority are sometimes deliberate, because they've long since stopped needing to prove it to anyone. He owned the building, not the firm that leased the upper floors, the building itself, the whole glass and steel structure that Clyde had pushed his cart through for 3 years, that Rachel and Tyler and Brandon walked into every morning without a thought for who the ground belonged to underneath their feet. Avery had grown up with a long driveway, a Sunday cook, and a grandfather who believed strongly in handwritten cards. She was clear-eyed enough about that life to know most people didn't have it, and honest enough with herself to know it had always threatened to define her before she'd had the chance to define herself. So when she moved to this city, she rented the small studio, kept her name off the public lease, and lived on the freelance income she'd been building for years. Her grandfather knew where she was. He respected the choice. He always had. He knows about the prank, she signed. Someone mentioned it to him. He also knows what you said in the break room, she continued. 3 separate people described it to him independently. A small pause. He pays attention to more than people assume. Clyde absorbed this without speaking. Then she told him the other thing, the part that explained everything. I was bullied badly when I was young, she signed, for years, because I was deaf. Not teasing, the kind of sustained cruelty that changes how you enter a room for the rest of your life. She said it without drama, the way people speak of things they've had a long time to reach an uneasy peace with. She had come out of it careful and self-reliant, building her independence deliberately, not from strength alone, but from the need to never again depend on a world that had made it clear it might not show up for her. She asked for less, needed less, on the surface. Protected herself from the particular humiliation of being treated as less than by people who hadn't bothered to know her. And then, on a cold Saturday morning, a janitor in a worn uniform had slid a cup of warm water across a cafe table without a word. No announcement, no sideways glance waiting for her to register the gesture. Just moved it over. Like it was obvious. Like she was someone whose comfort mattered. Plainly and without negotiation. That moment, she signed slowly. And the cookies, and the book you made for Blair, and the way you stood up to that server, it healed something I didn't realize I was still carrying. Not because you fixed anything large, because you kept doing small things, one after another, without needing anything back. Clyde looked at the table for a moment. Then he signed. Kindness doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes just having someone genuinely present for you is enough. Exactly that, she said. They were still sitting there at 6 in the evening when Avery's phone lit up. A building alert. Power down on her studio floor. Estimated repair time unknown. She started gathering her things. Clyde was already reaching into his jacket for the toolkit. Show me the panel. Clyde. You really don't. He gave her a look, patient, unhurried. I know I don't have to. Show me the panel. 25 minutes later, the lights in Avery's studio were on. Clyde had his sleeves rolled up, a faint streak of dust across one forearm, and the composed expression of a man who fixes things because things require fixing, and he happens to be standing there with the means to do it. No fuss, no invoice. He packed the kit away and straightened his sleeves. Avery sat down at her drafting table. She had been thinking about something for days, quietly, the way she worked through decisions she cared about. Now she signed it. I want to make Blair something, a personal logo, her own creative mark, something that belongs entirely to her. Clyde stopped in the process of buttoning his cuff. I can see her sensibility in the book you made, Avery continued. The way you laid out those signs, the spacing, the proportions, that came from someone who notices beauty in small things. She's going to notice it too. She deserves something that says so. He stood very still in the center of the room. He had been so focused on what he couldn't yet give Blair, the hearing device, the better apartment, the extra tutoring sessions he'd priced and set aside, that it hadn't occurred to him someone might simply want to give her something that recognized who she already was. She's going to love that, he signed. When he found the words again, his throat was moving. Tell her, Avery added, that it's from a friend who knows exactly what it means to find your voice in a way that's different from everyone else's. Clyde stepped into the hallway, stood there a moment in the fluorescent quiet. He thought about Blair at the kitchen table, bent over her drawings, the focused expression she wore when she was making something, the way she signed faster than he could follow when she was excited about an idea. She sees her already, he thought. She sees her, and she hasn't even met her yet. That was the thing about Avery Bennett. She paid the kind of attention most people saved for things that mattered to them, and she aimed it at whoever was standing in front of her. But what was already quietly in motion? In a conversation between Avery and her grandfather, in a clinic on the north side of the city, in a file on Edmund Bennett's desk, was something no amount of careful calculation at a kitchen table could have predicted. 3 people had already described what Clyde did in that break room to a man he'd never met. A man who happened to own the building, and that man was paying very close attention. Avery had watched Clyde through her studio window more than he knew, not just the evening she first noticed the paper bag on her desk. Weeks before that, she'd been working late, laptop open, reference images pinned in a row above the desk, and had looked up to rest her eyes. He was at the far end of the hall, pushing his cart past the row of darkened offices. And then he stopped. He stood there a moment, reached into his jacket and took out his phone. From where she sat, she couldn't see the screen, but she could see him. The way his shoulders came down an inch, the tightness leaving his jaw as he looked at whatever was there. A photograph, she had assumed, something that reminded him why he was still in the building at 11 at night. He put the phone away, picked up the card handles, kept going. She had thought about that moment for days afterward. She hadn't known his name then. She hadn't known about Blair, but she had recognized, clearly and without sentimentality, that she was watching something true. After that, she'd started watching for the paper bags. 3 weeks after the evening of the power outage, Avery made a call. Dr. Carol Marsh ran a pediatric audiology clinic on the north side of the city. Avery had found her through her grandfather's network. quietly, without telling Clyde, and without asking his permission. In the way you move on decisions you're certain about before the other person has the chance to say you really don't have to. She made the appointment. She paid for it in full, in advance. She asked Dr. Marsh to contact Clyde as a referral from a friend, and to keep Avery's name out of it for now. The call came on a Thursday morning. Clyde was sweeping near the parking garage entrance when his phone buzzed. A local number he didn't recognize. He almost let it go. Habit, mostly, but answered. Dr. Marsh explained that she had a cancellation Saturday morning and could fit Blair in for a full evaluation. The appointment had been covered through a private grant for children under 10, no cost to him. A grant, Clyde said. That's right, he thanked her. He hung up. And then he stood in the parking garage, under the flat fluorescent lights, next to a support pillar with a faded yellow stripe, and didn't move for a long moment. He thought about the pen and notepad calculations at the kitchen table, the warped blue thermos he'd packed every single morning, the work boots he'd resold twice because $52 was $52. 3 years of careful, patient, insufficient arithmetic. He didn't know yet what Avery had done. He stood there in the parking garage and let himself feel it, all of it, without trying to hold any of it back. One of the building's security guards walked past, glanced at him, and kept going without a word. Good man, Clyde thought. The following Friday, Edmund Bennett's assistant called. Mr. Bennett would like to see him Monday at 11 a.m., the private office, 14th floor. A floor Clyde had cleaned for 3 years and stood in for exactly 0 minutes. That Sunday night, Clyde ironed his uniform. Same gray fabric, same elbows gone thin from years of laundering. But he pressed it flat, creases straight, the way his mother had shown him before his first day of high school. It doesn't matter what you have, she'd said, moving the iron in long, even strokes. It matters how you carry it. Blair sat on the couch watching him, legs tucked up, a drawing balanced on her knees. You look handsome. Dad, she signed. Thank you, sweetheart. He set the iron down and looked at her for a moment. The ease in her face, the way she moved through the world without asking it to accommodate her, the way she had simply decided, at 8 years old, that she was going to find her life interesting. He had never told her to do that. She had arrived at it herself, he thought. Whatever happens Monday, I already have the most important thing. Edmund Bennett was a compact man with white hair and a handshake that still meant something. His 14th floor office was the opposite of performative. Real books on real shelves, a brass lamp with a green shade, a window overlooking the city with the blinds tilted just enough to let light in without glare. He stood when Clyde entered. Clyde hadn't expected that. They sat. And Edmund studied him the way a man does when he's already made up his mind, but wants to make sure he's reading the room correctly. I've been in this business 40 years, he said. A lot of employees, good ones, some exceptional ones. Every so often, someone who reminds me why the work is worth doing. He leaned forward slightly, voice straightforward and unhurried. 3 people came to me independently to describe what you said in that break room. Not people involved in what happened, just people who'd seen it and thought I should know. Getting 3 people in an office building to agree on anything is, in my experience, nearly impossible. A small pause. You stood up for someone else while you were already absorbing the consequences of having done the right thing. You kept showing up with decency after you'd been penalized for it. I've seen a lot of people manage one of those. Very few manage both. He slid a folder across the desk. Head of building maintenance, doubled salary, company housing 2 blocks from here, effective the 1st of next month. He let that sit. I'd also like you to design and lead a quarterly training for all staff, respectful communication with people who are deaf or hard of hearing. Mandatory, every department, starting this fall. You build it the way you think it should be built. Clyde opened the folder, read the first page, closed it carefully. He thought of Blair at the kitchen table, her drawing of the yellow door, the 3 figures on the porch. Yes, he said, I'd be glad to. Edmund nodded, the slow, settled nod of a man who has been holding a decision open for a while and has finally found the right place to put it down. But the promotion, the salary, the housing, not one of those was the moment that stopped the building cold. That came the following Saturday morning. At a cafe with mismatched chairs and a bell above the door that was always, reliably, glad to see you. Nobody in that building had ever stayed 5 extra minutes to look, and because of that, nobody had ever seen what was coming, not even close. Blair had never been to a surprise party before. She walked into the Yellow Cup on a Saturday morning holding her father's hand, wearing her good green dress, the one with the small buttons she could almost do by herself now. And the moment she stepped through the door, the room was full of faces and cornflower blue streamers. A banner above the counter that read, "Happy Birthday, Blair," in letters Avery had painted by hand the night before, staying up past midnight to get the spacing right. Paper lanterns hung from the ceiling beams. In the center of the room, a cake shaped like an open book. Because when Avery had asked Clyde what Blair loved most, he'd said without hesitating, "Everything that tells a story." Blair stood still for exactly 2 seconds. Then she erupted, the full, whole-body joy that only children can produce. Hands flying, face completely open, signing so fast that Clyde had to sign back, "Slow down, I'm old." And Blair laughed so hard she pressed her forehead into his shoulder and stayed there a moment, still shaking. Avery stood near the window, the same table where it had all begun. She was holding a small white box with a blue ribbon, smiling the way a person smiles when they have been waiting a long time to give something, and the moment has finally, truly arrived. Blair opened the box slowly, with the careful attention of someone who senses a gift is more than its wrapping. Inside was the hearing device, the good one, the one the specialist had described with quiet enthusiasm, and a price Clyde had written on his notepad and crossed out more times than he could count. Lightweight, designed for a child, with a hand-painted panel along one side, watercolor stars, open books, and, small and deliberate in the corner, a yellow front door. Avery had added that detail herself at her drafting table on an ordinary Tuesday evening, while the guitar player next door worked through his usual chord and the cup of chamomile went cold at her elbow. She had painted it without Clyde knowing, thinking of a drawing she'd never seen but somehow knew existed. Blair turned the device over in her hands, looked at it for a long moment. Then she looked up at Avery with an expression of the most careful seriousness. She signed, "Precisely. Are you a fairy?" The room laughed, warm and full, every corner of it, and Avery pressed a hand over her heart and shook her head. "No, just a friend." Blair considered this with great gravity. Then she turned to her father and delivered her verdict. "She's a fairy, Dad." Clyde and Avery looked at each other across the room. No words, no signs, just that. Avery set a folder on the table beside the cake. Inside, a summer creative scholarship, a design program for children with disabilities, run by a foundation she had long advised. Blair's name was already on the enrollment form, and printed on the folder's cover was the logo Avery had designed, a clean, confident mark in teal and gold, the letters BW at its center, shaped to suggest both an open hand and an open book. Blair traced it with one finger. "That's me," she signed. "That's you," Avery confirmed. Blair looked up. Nobody ever made something just for me before. Avery reached across and held Blair's hand for just a moment. "They should have," she signed. "A long time ago." Rachel, Tyler, and Brandon were there too. Not by accident, Avery had let them know, through Clyde, that they were welcome, and made clear, without cruelty, that an honest apology would be appropriate, and that Blair's birthday was a decent place to offer one, if they were prepared to mean it. They stood near the door, and they said what needed to be said. Not "I'm sorry if anyone was offended," but the plain, accountable version. "I was wrong. I treated you as a joke, and you were a person. I'm sorry." Blair listened to all of it with her full attention. Then she signed, with the uncomplicated generosity of a child raised by a father who had chosen decency, even when it cost him. "It's okay. Thank you for coming to my party." The room held its breath for exactly one beat. Then, it didn't. A few months later, the three of them were back at the same table by the same window on a quiet Sunday morning. Clyde, Blair, Avery. 3 cups of something warm between them. The easy and unhurried quiet of people who have arrived somewhere real and are content to let it settle before naming it. Blair told them about her new school, her new friends, the way sound still surprised her sometimes, how rain on a window was different from anything she'd imagined it would be, how her father's laugh had a texture she was still getting used to, how music felt like it was finally happening in the room with her, instead of somewhere far on the other side of a wall. Clyde looked at Avery. "Thank you," he signed, "for giving us a new life." She shook her head, gently, the way she always did when he said something she wanted to push back on. "You gave me hope," she signed, "through the smallest things, a cup of warm water on a cold morning, cookies left without a name on them, a book made by hand at a kitchen table." She paused. "You weren't trying to be remarkable. That's what made it so." Blair looked at both of them with the deep satisfaction of a child who understands something the adults are still figuring out. She signed, "Dad and Miss Avery taught me that kindness is the greatest superpower." The bell above the cafe door jingled. Someone came in from the cold. An ordinary morning in an ordinary city, where something extraordinary had happened in the quietest possible way. This story reminds us of something simple, something easy to forget on a long Tuesday afternoon when the house is quiet and the day feels like it doesn't much need you in it. Clyde didn't change 2 lives by being extraordinary. He changed them by paying attention and then doing the small next thing. So this week, try one of these. Leave a note in your neighbor's mailbox. Not a card, just a torn piece of paper that says, "I thought of you today." The next time you're at the pharmacy and someone looks confused at the counter, stay an extra 2 minutes and help them sort it out. Set a place at the table on Sunday, the good dishes, not the everyday ones, and call the grandchild who lives farthest away, just to listen. You don't need a grand gesture. You need a warm cup and the willingness to slide it across the table. That's enough. That has always been enough. You can be someone's hero today. Just start with one small act of kindness. Written by a human with AI's assistance. This story exists to spread one simple belief. Kindness is never wasted, and no matter how long the darkness lasts, life always keeps its warmest rays of light, waiting only for us to believe, to be kind, and to keep moving forward.